Good. All right, so make it a new, we're going to treat it like it's a new unit. We're going to call this unit 6.1. AP still says that this is all part of the same unit, but I think this is so big, like it's really difficult for me to conceive this as one unit, right? So we're doing this as like part two, unit 6, part 2. Okay. Um, so let's start with A, President Hoover. So Hoover's a president who is elected in 1929, and he, generally speaking, is held in really low regard. Really low regard. He's almost always in like the bottom quarter of presidents, and this is largely because he's the president during the Great Depression, and he basically makes the Great Depression worse. Right? He is not to blame for the depression, but he absolutely makes it worse. He strongly believes in laissez-faire economics. Eric, what's laissez-faire economics?
Free market, hands off.
Hold on, I can barely hear you. All right, say it again.
It's like a market where the government doesn't intervene.
You were cutting out. I couldn't hear. Say it again.
It's like where the government doesn't intervene with the economy.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, sorry. Yeah, it's where the government has little or no intervention in the economy, right? As little as possible. And he believes that the private sector should do everything, um, which is okay until like a third of the country is, you know, jobless and homeless, and people want him to do this. I want you to include in your description of him the concept and put it in quotes, rugged individualism. Rugged individualism. He believes in something called rugged individualism, where he basically believes in kind of maximum individual, right? Where people are um, completely and totally responsible for their own, like, for their own lives, for their own successes, their own failures. You are completely responsible for those things. And he looks at it that way. He looks at it basically and he says, um, that if you lose your job, it's not because you're black or because you're a woman or because of whatever. It's because you yourself weren't a good enough employee, right? Like it's your fault you lost your job. And if you were better, then you would have a job, is basically what he's saying, right? Which is a pretty cold comfort for people who are unemployed, you know. So this is why Hoover is generally considered quite low. A little tidbit of history: his vice president is the first non-white vice president. Right? His vice president Curtis was a Native American. It doesn't really mean anything. Like he doesn't, you know, radically change anything or do anything. He's the vice president, but it's just kind of, you know, interesting to know. He was like half Native American, born on a reservation, grew up on a reservation actually in Kansas. It's kind of interesting, I think. You know? All right, so why does Hoover suck so much? Okay, Hoover sucks because almost instantly in 1929, the Great Depression is going to get started. The traditional start date for the Great Depression is October of 29, October of 29 with the stock market crash. But there's quite a bit of evidence that the Great Depression is actually starting a couple of months earlier, because we have like a rising unemployment rate and some other stuff that's going on in the country. So I think that the most accurate place to start the Great Depression is in probably August of 29. But by the time we get to the stock market crash in October of 29, it's clear that we are in a depression. So in October 29, we get this massive, massive drop, massive drop in stock values, right? From 350 all the way down to 50. Okay. The American economy over the course of basically one day, essentially, we have this huge drop, and then a bunch of rich people buy stocks to try to fix the economy. And then it rises temporarily, but then it drops again. The US economy is basically going to shrink by about 11% it's the largest economic contraction the United States has ever experienced, ever. the largest economic contraction the United States has ever experienced. It's the largest permanent drop in economic value in the United States. So what the heck happened, right? Stock markets go up and down all the time. What the heck is going on, right? We can usually tie things to a cause, right? The stock market crash of 2020 was because of coronavirus. Stock market crash of 2008 was because of the housing market was oversaturated. So the stock market crash of 1929, the primary cause is what we call speculation. Speculation. From an economic standpoint, in this context, the word speculation means buying stocks with debt. Buying stocks with debt. Okay. Now, at this point in time, Americans, for the first time ever, are accruing debt, and they're taking out loans to pay for things. And a lot of what they're buying is the stock market. The stock market basically grew all through the 1920s, and so people started looking at this as a good investment. And this is the first time in American history that like regular people are participating in the stock market. Right? Prior to this, it really had only been basically banks and super rich people. And that's basically the only ones. For the first time in American history, the American people. The speculation is like the straw that breaks the camel's back, right? It's the straw that breaks the camel's back, but it is not, I don't think it's the total cause, right? It's like the thing at the end. I think these two over here, overproduction and overconsumption, these two things are much larger causes, I would say, much larger causes. So overproduction and overconsumption. So let's deal with these two things. Okay, so overproduction. Overproduction is where factories have become so efficient in making products. They've been able to make so many more products and make it so much cheaper that the factories are just making tons and tons and tons of stuff. And it's so much stuff that they just can't sell it. So the factories are ending up with warehouses and warehouses and warehouses worth of stuff. We're talking like everything from like cars to refrigerators to radios to shoes to clothes to whatever. Anything that you can make manufactured is just overproduced. Economic science hasn't really caught up yet. And so like economics as like a concept is only kind of barely being invented. And so we don't really have a lot of like universities teaching economics. We don't have a lot of that at this time. And so businesses are very, very bad at predicting how many of their things they will sell, right? And so Ford ends up making like 100,000 too many cars. Now, think about supply and demand. If you have too much supply, what's going to happen to the price of goods?
Goes down.
Yeah, it's going to go down because no one's buying your stuff, right? This is a double-edged sword. Companies start to lower their prices. They start to temporarily drop their prices in order to sell more stuff. The problem is that by doing that, they're cutting into their profits, and they can't stay that reduced rate for long, right? They have to bring it back up again. The problem is that once you bring it back up again, so that's your first double-edged sword, right? So the first problem is that you're losing your profits. The second problem is that after you raise your prices back up to where they should be, Americans don't want to buy your stuff because they know you discounted it last time, so they're waiting for the new discount this time. You've revealed if you normally sell a new car for $500, you've revealed that you can sell your car for $400. And so when you try to sell me one for $500, I say no. I'm like, I'll just wait because I know that you're going to fail and I know that I'm going to be able to buy it for cheaper. So that's a real problem. The other big problem is overconsumption. Okay, so this is overproduction is on the behalf of the factories and companies. Overconsumption is on behalf of the overconsumption is on behalf of the consumers. Okay, so the American people are taking out loans not just for stocks, but they're also taking out loans for houses, for cars, for everything. This is the birth of commercial debt, basically, of consumer debt. I'm sorry, consumer debt. And this is the birth of what will eventually become credit cards, right? They haven't invented credit card technology yet, but it's coming. It's coming, and this is the invention of it. So for the first time, Americans are buying like clothing on debt, right? Clothing and appliances and furniture and stuff, right? And they're buying all the stuff on debt. And so when the economy starts to crash and people start to lose their jobs, they can't pay the debt. So speculation, like if you think of this as, if you think of the Great Depression as like a giant wildfire, right? And the wildfire has consumed 100 million square miles of land. Speculation is the match that lit the fire, but overproduction, overconsumption is the kindling over 100 million square miles. I'm trying to think. So you are, how much time have we been here? Okay, so let's do one more topic. We'll do another topic. So let's do a bank run. Make this your next big number, big C. C should be bank runs. All right, so after the stock market crash, we're going to start getting something called bank runs happening all through the 1990s. So a bank run is where a bank is forced to close because they don't have enough physical currency. Like they don't have enough like dollar bills. So a bank is forced to close because they don't have enough liquid assets. They don't have cash. So here's the way a bank run works. Okay, a bank run basically starts, if you picture like a little town, right? We're in this little town, and Bobby here is a smart guy. He watches the news, he pays attention, and he sees everything that's happening in New York, and he starts to freak out about it. So he goes to his local bank and he pulls out all of his money because he says, I don't trust these banks. They're doing all sorts of crazy stuff in New York. I'm going to pull out all my money. So he pulls out his $1,000 from the bank. And then Sally sees that happening. And Sally says, whoa, Bobby's really smart. I'm going to pull out my money too. And so she pulls out all of her money. And then someone else sees those two and says, hey, why are you guys pulling out your money? And Bobby says, well, the banks are not reliable. The banks are causing all this trouble. And they say, oh crap, we better pull out our money. And then so Joe comes in to pull out his money and he yells over, hey, John, Matt, come and pull out your money, right? So then they come and pull out the money. The problem is that banks don't have cash on hand usually, right? Where does the bank have their money usually?
I don't know. Treasury or something?
Yeah, so like if I go to like a local branch like Zions Bank, right? And I look it up online and I see that Zions Bank is holding, whatever, $150 billion, something like that, right? How much cash will be at a Zions Bank branch?
Not that much.
No, not anywhere close to that much, right? Are they going to have $1 billion on hand? No, not even remotely close, right? Banks are really only required to have about 1% of their money in cash. And the reason is because most people don't withdraw their money. So what does the bank do with that money when you deposit it? Where's the money?
Store it somewhere else. But
Well, they send it to the Federal Reserve, right? But like the money exists like in accounts, right? It exists as like a digital number, as a number on the paperwork. In the 1920s, it's not digital, obviously, right? But it's on paperwork. But the money, the bank account exists in this like abstract form, right? The money exists in this abstract form. And the money is actually in the form of like loans out to people, right? When you go and get a loan from the bank is using my money to pay for your loan, right? So if you, Eric, buy a house, right? They give you $200,000 to buy a house. So you make payments every month. Of that $200,000, it came out of my money that I gave them, right? Some portion of it, right? And they use that because you are making these monthly payments. And so you're making interest payments on there. So if you pay like $1,000 in your mortgage, let's say, a couple hundred of those dollars or 500 or 10,000, whatever, right? Like say $200 is interest and $800 is being reduced from your loan, something like that, right? I'm making these numbers up, but you get the idea, right? The problem with the bank run is that everybody goes to the bank and tries to withdraw their money at the same time. And so the bank doesn't have enough money. And so they have to close. The bank is forced into bankruptcy because they don't have enough money. And this is where it gets really bad. When a bank goes in bankruptcy, everyone in the bank loses their money. The money just ceases to exist because the bank ceases to exist.
okay.
Right? So if you had $1,000 in the bank and then me and all my buddies freaked out and we shut the bank down, right? Your $1,000 just disappears. You can try to sue me. You can try to get money. Like you can try to get the money back. But if the company doesn't exist, what are you going to do? It just doesn't exist anymore. This is incredibly problematic, right? Incredibly problematic because as all these banks start to close, every bank that closes causes hundreds and hundreds of bankruptcies of all the local businesses and all the local companies and all the local people because they all lost their savings. So if you look at this graph here in the middle, right, these are all bank failures. So bank runs calls bank failures. And these are all bank failures that are happening. By the time we get to 1933, 4,000 banks go bankrupt in 1 year. That's insane, right? And we're going to get to a point, the worst bank run in the country is the Bank of the United States in New York City fails. Today, we call that the Federal Reserve. So the actual Federal Reserve, we're talking like the bank of the federal government. The office in New York closes because it loses so much money. And when it does that, $200 million just disappear. Gone. It just ceases to exist. Okay. These bank runs are nightmares, right? Because they have the added problem. If you're like in a little town somewhere, right? Now the only bank in town has collapsed. A lot of people lost their money, but you're still doing okay. You have a business, right? You have a business. And so let's say you have a bakery, right? You're a baker. And so you need to pay money to the chicken farmer for eggs, right? He brings you deliveries of eggs every week and you pay him, you write him a check and he takes that check. But he comes to you and he says, I can't take your check because the bank is closed, so I can't cash the check. So I can't give you the eggs if you don't give me cash, right? You see the problem here? You need to have cash on hand to run a business, but you now have to pay all your cash out to your vendors And if you can't do it, then the chicken farmer says, I can't pay you, I can't give you your eggs. If you can't get your eggs, your bakery is not going to be open very long. Right? It causes all of these added problems. Or let's say you're a worker. Let's say you work for, you know, like the coal mine or something. You work for like the lumber mill, right? And then the lumber mill pays you a paycheck. Well, what are you going to do with that paycheck?
Can't-
Nothing. What are you going to do? Right? It gets so bad that like the state of Kentucky, the entire state has 2 banks in the entire state. Right? The whole state doesn't have a bank. So what are you going to do? You're going to have to like drive, you know, 200 miles to find a bank to cash your paycheck. This causes so many problems, and it has all of these like knock-on effects. Every time a bank goes bankrupt, it has this ripple effects like through the pond, you know, where it hits all these different businesses, all these different things. Okay. This is where I'm going to leave you. But for you and for Ananya, I'm going to say this for her benefit as well, because I know she's watching the videos. The in-class group is doing the assignment called the Trial of Roosevelt. They're going to put Roosevelt on trial. If you look in Canvas, you'll see the assignment there. Okay. Obviously, you're not in class, so you're not going to do the in-class activity. But you do still need to be able to make an argument regarding this trial. Okay, so in the assignment, we are putting Franklin Roosevelt on trial. He has been accused of taking all the credit for ending the Great Depression. Right? He takes all the credit for ending the Great Depression, and he's been accused of this. And we're going to find if he's guilty of taking the credit or if he actually deserves the credit. And so I've taken the class and divided them into half, and I've made them argue the case one side or the other. For you and for Ananya, in order to get these points, I want you to write, we're going to treat it like 2 test questions, essentially, 2 like 5-paragraph essays. I want you to answer both sides of the debate as just an essay. As an essay. Well, would you rather do it as like a poster or something, or would you rather do it as like an essay?
I mean, either one is fine. Don't really have a preference.
Yeah, you're pretty good at writing. I'll leave it as an option. You and Ananya can do it. I'll let you guys both do it as an option. You can either do a poster where half of it is saying, yes, Roosevelt deserves the credit because of these reasons, and the other half is saying, no, Roosevelt doesn't deserve the credit for these reasons. Or you can do it as 2 5-paragraph essays.
All right.
Is that okay? I don't really care what side you believe, whether he deserves the credit or doesn't deserve the credit. The truth is probably he deserves some of the credit and probably not, you know what I mean? That's the truth, right?
Yeah.
But you do need to know the argument. You do need to be able to make the argument. Yes, he deserves the credit because of A, B, and C. No, he does not deserve the credit because of X, Y, and Z. Okay?
Yeah.
I think the easiest thing for you and Ananya to do is 2 essays. That feels like the easiest for me to do for you. But I'm open if you guys want to be creative and express yourself in some other way. I'm on board. I'm open. Cool.
Yeah. Sounds good.
It's due on Monday. On Monday, they're doing the trial here in class, right? So what I'll open up the Canvas assignment so that you guys can submit it on the Canvas assignment. But I won't have anyone in class submit anything. It'll just be with you guys. Cool?
Right.
Does that seem good? And then I'll just grade you guys individually. Yeah. There's not really a way to, we probably could do something if we had like maybe 10 people online, we could do something like this, but
Yeah.
it's just you and Ananya. So like, it's you and Ananya doesn't come to class, right?
Yeah.
So here we are.
Well,
Right. But I'll continue doing lessons with you and stuff. And we'll cover all the material, but you do need to be able to express the idea.
all
Cool.
right.
All right. Do you have any questions or problems or anything?
No.
Okay. Oh, the last thing, did you get your registration for the ACT?
Oh, no. I emailed Mr. Olson about it. He said he forwarded it to Mr. Hole,
Yeah, Mr. Hull's the guy you want to talk to.
but I haven't done it. Okay.
So the class all filled it out in person here. And obviously I had you and Ananya's in the box, right? I told him that you guys were online, and he took yours, but he had to send it out in the mail. You're going to want to email it. He had to send it to you in the mail so you could fill it out and stuff.
Okay.
Even if you don't get it, even if you don't get it by the day of the test, come in and take the test anyway. Okay.
Okay.
It's on March 9th. March
Mhm.
9th, you need to come in and take, you and Ananya, both of you, you need to come in and take the ACT. The ACT is an important test. It's a really important test. It's the test that's primarily used to evaluate whether or not you're going to get into college and to evaluate like scholarship. So I'm assuming that both you and Ananya want to go to college, so you absolutely need to use it. Okay. Right. You're going to want to, you want to take this test. This is not a test you want to avoid.
Right.
So even if you don't get the paperwork done, come in anyway. The worst case scenario, they'll just make you fill out the like address and phone number and all that crap. They'll make you fill all that stuff out on the day of the test in a worst case scenario. Ideally, they mail it to you and you do it. Okay. You can send an email to Hole, Mr. Hole, Craig Hole, craig.hole@canyonsdistrict.org.
Mhm.
CRAIG, Craig.HOLE, Hole, at canyonsdistrict.org. And he's the guy who's in charge of it. So you may want to email him and just be the squeaky wheel, right? Because he's juggling, 700 people. So you want to be the squeaky wheel on it. Okay.
Okay.
But even if it's not taken care of, come on the day of. Come on the day of, and because you are registered, all of the 11th graders are registered. So you already have like a classroom assigned to you, like you are registered on the day, right? So even if that isn't filled out, they have a test for you waiting. So cool. Cool. And the same goes for Ananya as well.
What time would it be?
I think it starts at 8. I would come here at 7:30. I would come here like either 7 or 7:30 just to double check and make sure you have everything squared away.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Cool.
Cool.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, be here at 7:30. School starts at 7:30. So I think that they're getting everyone seated. So I would come at 7. I would come at 7 just to make sure.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Cool. Yeah. All right. March 9th.
Right. Yeah.
Cool. All right. This is a good place to stop. So I'm going to leave you here for today.